So now let's start designing these templates for our loop grids or loop carousels. Again, these templates can be used for either of those elements. So at this point, I do just want to quickly show you that underneath the page builder, we can also create these outside of the page builder. So we can do that within the settings here under our theme builder. So you will notice now that we have a new item. Well, it may not be new at the time of recording, at the time that you're sitting there taking this course, but we have a loop item there. So we can absolutely create a loop item here, and we're going to be doing that straight from within this page here. But just know you can also build it here just from another page, from the page builder, as if it was building any other page. So let's actually now come along and start creating a new template. Now, of course, if you had templates, you could start by typing them in there and then just adding that into this loop. But we are going to create a template by selecting create and then select save. And then we can start working with the loop template. So now you'll notice that we have this small box here where we can basically start creating and designing what this loop template is going to look like. So this is going to be filled with lots of nested containers and dynamic content. So we're going to be working with the navigator over here. So apologies if this gets a little bit deep with the number of nested containers. But again, it's just all good experience anyway, right? So let's actually start designing this now. So let's first come along and drag a container in. And within this container, we want to drag in one more container. And then this container, we are going to duplicate. We can see that that primary container, the top level parent, is actually got a flow of vertical. That is exactly what we want. And within this container, so this top one here, we are going to use a background image. And that is going to be our dynamically injected image, our website image. And then we are going to have a 3-column layout here, which is going to display the number of staff, the duration, and the budget for this project. And then the small excerpt below that, which is going to be the client brief. So let's actually start designing that now, because then once we've designed this, we can then determine the query for that carousel. We're going to change that to case studies, and then basically these loops are going to loop, well, basically the loop element is going to use this and loop through every single case study that we select under the query selection. So really, really cool stuff. And again, if it's sounding very confusing now, don't worry, bear with me as we work through this, and it will hopefully start making a lot more sense. So let's first start adding this image here. So what we want to do, this container just here, let's come along to style. Let's give this a classic background type and then not select an image. We want to select the dynamic tags, and we're going to come to ACF, and then we want to change that key to desktop image. So we then obviously need to change the position to top center, the display size to cover. And I liked the hover effect that we did previously, so we're going to use the same for this one. So now for the same background, we're going to select hover, we're going to select the background type, let's select the dynamic tag, let's select the ACF, let's select the key for the desktop image, so that is selected. And again, the position this time will be bottom center, and it will be display size of cover. And then as we hover, it's going to scroll all of the that page. So let's just slow that down a bit, maybe 2 seconds or 3 seconds, even 3 seconds I think is looking good. So 3 seconds is okay, and that is taken care of. That is looking good. So what I am also going to do here, do I want to remove that? Yes, I am. So the outside, this is how my brain works sometimes. It can be very, very scatty, particularly when I'm designing on a wing or when I'm winging it. So this parent container, let's remove the default padding and margin. That way, that is going to butt the image all the way up to the edge. And then within this second container, let's come along and drag in 3 new containers. So one container, and then I'm going to duplicate, and then I'm going to duplicate. And the container, the parent container of those three, so this one, I'm going to change the direction there to horizontal so that we have three looking just like that. So lastly, I am also just going to duplicate this one last time, the parent container that those three were nested in. I'm going to delete two of those below containers, so we just have that one down there. So these are going to be, these three containers will display those dynamic pieces of information, so the number of staff, the duration and the budget, and then this below section will contain the just the excerpt, the client brief for this website. So let's go away and start adding that in now. So let's select add element, and so here we want to drag in a heading, and in this heading we want to say number of staff. Let's change that to a H4. Let's now come along and style this. So the text color, let's make accent. Let's change the typography to primary. Let's make that smaller, so maybe a 1.2. Let's also make that quite thin, so maybe a 400 or 500. I think 500 is okay. That letter space, now I'm going to actually make it a bit tighter so that it looks like that. So a -1. In fact, I might make it a minus, let's have a look, -8. That is okay. And then inside of that, I'm going to add in a counter widget. So let's add in a counter. So there is also a counter under the essential add-ons, but we're going to just use the standard elemental one. So we're going to drag that in. And now the starting number is going to be 0, but the ending number is now going to be our dynamic value, which is going to be under ACF number field. We select that. We can now select the drop down, and that isn't working. Then we just go ahead and publish and refresh this because I don't think I refreshed. And now we can come back in and edit this template again. And hopefully them fields will be there. So let's come back to this counter element, ACF number field, key, and there we go. We want to now select the number of staff involved. So that is good. That is taking care of that. The animation is fine at 2 seconds. That's cool. We are going to remove that title because we don't want that. Now let's style this. So the typography here, let's go ahead and change this to primary. And let's now make this bigger. So maybe a 3. Let's also make this a bit bolder. So maybe 700. And then for the text color, we could go with something like primary or even secondary. I think secondary might look pretty cool. We can have a look anyway and see how it is. That is fine. In fact, what I think I am going to do, and this will be even better still, is let's go ahead and change the color here of the counter to accent. And instead of having this heading here, what we could do is actually use a dual color heading. And this is an element that is available with the Essential Add-ons plugin. So let's play around with this one. So let's just delete this icon. Now, what we want to do here is turn off the icon. We're going to change the HTML tag here to maybe a 4. And then the title here, or in fact, the title, the last part I'm going to delete. And the title first part, I'm just going to replace with number of staff. And now we can also delete this subtext because we only care about that one heading just there. So let's now just style this. So we can come along to the style tab. We can also remove all of the default padding and margin. And then we can come down to color and typography. And we can set this to a dual color. So this looks really, really cool. I'm going to select that first color to maybe secondary. And the second color, in fact, I'm going to just, again, this isn't going to be on brand. Because I would obviously want to be using the same brand colors that we've used throughout. But just to make this look really cool and stand out, I'm going to just go ahead and use these two colors. And now we can actually change the size of this. So we're going to select typography of primary. And let's now make that 1.2 again. And let's maybe make that a 500. And let's make that letter spacing maybe a 0.8 again, or even a -1. In fact, no, I'm just going to go with a 0.8. That's okay. That line height actually looks quite high now, so I'm going to decrease that. Maybe a 0.8. Sorry, not a 0.8, a 1.2, 1.3, 1.4. There we go. So number of staff, I'm going to delete that second one. We now no longer need that. I'm also going to add some negative margin to the bottom of this because I know it has some default margin there that we can't remove. So -10 like that. So that is the first one taken care of. Now I'm simply going to come along and duplicate that, and then duplicate that again and delete these other two. So delete that and delete that. So now we can come along and finish off the design. So the next one is going to be duration. So let's go ahead and type that in. Duration, we could say project duration. We can see that just overspills in, which is annoying. So what I'm actually going to do there is each of these containers here that these are nested in, I'm going to come along and remove that default padding. I'm going to remove that default padding. And I'm going to remove that default padding so that it looks like that. So now we have duration. And now we also have the time here, the counter. And we're going to change this now. Instead of the number of staff, we're going to change this to duration. So that is that. And then finally, we have the budget. So let's just quickly edit this. So we're going to change this to budget. And then we're going to come along to the number. And we're going to change this now to the budget. Now, under the advanced, we have the option to add in a before, after, and fallback. So here we actually want to add in a pound sign or dollars or whatever it is, because then that's going to make that into, it's going to make it look like it's a currency, first of all, which is exactly what we want. And then the duration, I'm going to come along to, and the same thing under advanced, I'm going to select after, and I'm going to type in weeks like that. And then for number of staff, obviously for that, we don't need anything. So let's now finish this off because we want to add let me close that off. We want to add a text editor down here. We could even add in a heading as well, which is going to dynamically inject the category. And all we would have to do is configure that to the post terms. So we could do that, but I don't think that I'm going to bother because we don't really have to go into detail about, or we could do, in fact, let's go ahead and do that anyway. Let's just finish this text editor off. Let's delete that text and use the dynamic tags. And for here, we want to use the ACF field, and we are looking for the brief, so the website brief. So that is fine. We now have the brief that's going to be dynamically injected. Let's now just edit the styling of this. So the typography is going to be text and the text color will be text. So that is okay. Let's just drag in a heading there as well, which will pull in the post terms. So into the same container there, let's use the heading. And here, let's use a dynamic tag. Let's pull in the post terms. Let's change that to a H4. Let's change the styling of this to a typography primary. Let's make that a lot smaller because we don't want that to be that big. So maybe a 0.6 or a 0.7. We could have that 600. That is still fine. And yeah, we can see how that looks once that gets injected into that. So one thing that I do want to do now, first of all, because there is going to be the gaps between the top level element here, the top level container, let's come along to the layout and just remove that gaps between so that we don't have that gap. So with that done, we can now take a look and see what this looks like. So let's select save and back, and we can see what this actual template is going to look like. And as we can see, it doesn't look very good at the minute, but there is still some stuff that we have to do. And if we actually select on the grid here, so the loop grid, what we need to specify first, now that we've specified the loop item that we want it to use for the grid, we can of course determine the columns and items per page, so how many rows, and the layouts, but we need to change the query. And this is where the magic happens, because at the minute we do not want to use posts, because we don't have any blog posts. We want to use case studies. So let's change that to case studies. And we can see that it is almost there, although not quite. So we do still need to make some edits to that. So let's actually do that now by coming back up to the layout and editing this template again. So we can see that we've got the duration and the budgets as not a number. And that is obviously because what we've done here was we added that after, right? So I'm going to just remove that weeks. And then for the budget here, I'm going to come along and remove the pound sign as well. So let's do that now. So that's going to be under here. Let's remove that. So that is okay. And what we actually need to do is, instead of using that before and after, we are going to use the number and number suffix here. So the prefix and the suffix. This is what we should have done. So that is going to be a pound sign. And then the duration is going to be number prefix, going to be number suffix, hours or weeks, we said, didn't we? So weeks like that. So another option that we could do, we could actually go along and leave that. In fact, I think that I will edit this. So let's follow, bear with me. Let's go along. Again, you're just seeing how my brain dumps work. I'm going to drag this counter to the top, and I'm going to leave that as 0 number of staff. That's not obviously 0. And same with this one. I'm going to flip the order, because this way is going to keep all of those numbers, counters in line as well. So £1,000 budget, we can change this 5 weeks to complete. I can spell 2 0, and then we can change that number of staff involved to staff involved, and then we can change the budget to project budget, so that it looks like that. So what we also want to do here is, let's come along. I do want to make those smaller, because I can see those counters are going to be way too big. So let's just edit the styling of that under the typography. So let's select that. Let's make that maybe a 2. How does that look as a 2? And that doesn't seem to be moving. I'm going to go with a 1.8 just to see how that looks. And then I'm going to just right click, copy that and paste that style in. So paste style. I know it's not moving yet, but that is probably just because it needs to be saved and refreshed. So now each of those counters has a typography of 1.8. So that should be better. And what we want to do with this container here, so the parent container for the counters, let's just add a small bit of padding to the top there. So let's select top, maybe 20, and then to the left and right I'm going to add maybe 10 and 10, and then to the bottom I'm actually going to leave blank, because we can see that this one is actually pulling in some padding there anyway. So let's see how that looks now. So if we now select publish, we can now select save and back. Oh, I just forgot that we didn't set a height for that image either, so let's go and do that. We are almost there. It is looking a lot better. Let's first come back and edit this template one last time. Let's give those background images a fixed width. So let's come into that second container there, which has the background image. Let's come to the layout, and then let's change that min height to maybe 200. I think 200 will be okay. Let's actually change that rem to 0.7. That is okay, and I'm going to do the same again. Copy that, paste that in, paste style, and then paste style. So that is okay. So now I'm going to select save and back, and fingers crossed this is going to do the trick. So we are very almost there now. So we can see that these are looking really cool, right? So we have these really nice tiles, which are now displaying all of our content in. I'm not quite sure why the consciously inspired isn't coming up there, which is a bit strange. Now, of course, we didn't actually add in a title, did we? So that's always going to help. So we're going to come back into the edit template. Let's come down to the post title. Let's drag that in above the brief. And let's come along and we don't need to do anything there except for style it. So let's change that text color to accent. Let's change that typography to primary. And that is going to be fine. I'm going to make that a little bit smaller, maybe a 1.6 or even a 1.5, or actually a 1.2 will probably be fine. And now what I want to do with the very top level container, I want to add some box shadows. So let's come along to advanced for this one. Let's come down to border, or maybe the border is under style here, isn't it? Let's select border. Let's select box shadow. Let's make that a little bit lighter so it's not so dark. And then we can play around with some of the positionings if we wanted to. But I think the blurring and stuff if we wanted to. But I think that is probably going to look okay as it is. So let's now select, or let's just make sure why that wasn't dynamically injecting. Anyway, I don't know why that image wasn't coming in. But let's now select save and back. And we can see we are almost there. So we can see that that is now looking a lot better. If we wanted to add some more style into these templates, maybe we wanted to add some borders, there's still a lot of cool stuff that we could do to make these stand out more. Of course, you can go away and do that. So let's now just start editing the carousel, the loop grid, now that we have our loop template taken care of. So what I'm actually going to do is I'm going to bring this lesson to an end now, and I'm going to start on the styling of the loop carousel or the loop grid in the next lesson.